Hi everybody, in this video I'm going to introduce JMP and we're going to focus on the feature of how we can select data and how we can use row states to manipulate or select what kind of data we want to look at. The data we're going to use here are literacy rates and average years of schooling. And I'm just going to make a simple plot where I'm going to do a fit y by x. So we'll go to analyze fit y by x. That opens up this dialog. And I'm going to put literacy on the y-axis because that's the variable we're interested in. And we think it'll vary with AY, the average years of education. And let's see if it does. It looks like it does. So we've opened up this chart. I'm going to enlarge it, make it a little bit easier. The one downside of JMP is it doesn't make the nicest graphs. So in another video, we'll look about exporting our equations and data back into Excel to make something more attractive. But you can see here, LIT for literacy is shown here on the vertical axis. That's the percent of literacy in a given country in a given year, and it's plotted against the average year of education. And unsurprisingly, and fortunately, the more education we have, the more years of education we have, then the higher literacy rates are. But you can see there's a lot of spread in this data. And what the nice thing is about JMP is that we could take a big data set like this and just target different parts. So for example, if we're interested in those countries or those years that have high rates of literacy, we can just drag over all this data over here. And that data will automatically be selected in the chart, and it'll also be selected back here in the rows. And so if you look at the sheet itself, you'll see that United Arab Emirates is over here with a very high literacy rate, 92.9%, with 9.35 average years of education. It's among these high literacy values that we selected here graphically. Instead, if we wanted to look at low literacy rates, we could drag down here and we could scroll through and look for whatever rows might be highlighted to find out which countries and which years those belong to. It also lets us do an analysis, which we'll look at in a moment. But the reason why this is kind of neat, for example, they're not easy to see, but there are these points right here. These are examples of very high literacy at very low rates of average education. Look at this, after 1 year of education, average year of education, these are examples right here. I know those points are not easy to see where you have very high literacy rates. We can scroll along until we bump into one of those rows. Here's one here, the United Kingdom. It has in the year 1870, had a 76% literacy rate with less than 1 year of schooling. So if we wanted to find out which programs, which years, which countries were especially good at educating their population and achieving a high literacy rate over a short period of time, we can use this kind of graphical selection tool to pick out certain points that we're interested in. Now we're going to do an analysis. If we want, we could see this little red curve, this little red arrow. If we wanted to, we could fit, let's say, a line through that data. But let's say we just want to look at, I'm going to undo that fit. I'm going to remove the fit. Let's say we just wanted to look at data in the United States. If we've got a lot of data from all over the world, what we could do is if we want to just focus on the United States or any other country for that matter, what we could do is go back to the spreadsheet here, click on the United States. I'm going to scroll down till we have all the data from the US. And then once those are selected, if we go back to the chart, you can see some black dots. Again, they don't show up very well here. That's one flaw in JMP. The graphs aren't terrific. But if we want to just look at those data alone and analyze those data, we could do a little trick. And that's really one of the main points of this video. Once they're selected here in the spreadsheet part of JMP, we can go to rows and we're going to go to row selection and we're going to invert the row selection. So we're going to choose everything that's not the United States. We're going to go back to rows, hide and exclude. So it means those data that are not the US will be hidden from the graph and they'll be excluded from any regression analysis that we do. if we go back to the chart, you'll now see that it's only the data from the US that show up. What I'm going to do is make a new chart, analyze, fit Y by X, and I'll do the same chart, literacy versus average years of education. And I'm replotting it because now I've got a chart where the axes zoom in on just that US data. So I'm just going to close that and we'll work in this chart here. Now I know those data are not very easy to see, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all these data, select all of the United States data by dragging. I'm going to shift drag and try to select those. And we'll go to markers and maybe make them into black dots. They show up a little bit better. They're still not great, but I think we could see them a little bit better. Oh, I missed one. So we'll change that, markers, and then make it into a black dot, make it a little more visible. All right, so now let's do a little bit of analysis with this data. Oh, by the way, before I forget, let's look at something else. Look at all these data for the United States. Why is it that only a small number have black dots? JMP does something very helpful. We're plotting literacy versus average years of education. Both of those numbers must be reported for a dot to appear, for a data point to appear in this chart. If we click over here and we want to know why isn't this row being plotted, it's because in 1871, we do not have a value for literacy or average year of education. If you look at 1875, that's also not plotted because we have a value for average year of education, but we don't know what the literacy rate is. So we only have a plot. In our plot, we will only show data that have the things that we asked for. We asked about literacy and average year, so only those years that have both of those data values presented or reported, those are the only ones that are going to show up. So that's kind of a nice feature. If you do this in Python, you have to do some data cleaning where you have to get rid of these rows here that report either nothing at all or only one of the two things that you need to make the plot. But JMP understands that there's no point in even trying to plot this because there's no value listed. Let's look at something else. There is another peculiar aspect of the United States data. Let's go to distribution of the years. So what years are data available? So when we look at the distribution, look at this. It goes from a little over 2000 to, which is close to the present day, but it goes to minus 1000. Do we have data from 1000 BC? What are all these data with negative year values? Well, if we scroll up, we'll see them listed over here. For some reason, in the data that I pulled from the internet, somebody put in these weird values for year, and those are useless. We don't have, the United States didn't even exist in 10,000 BC or even the year 800. So there's a bunch of years here that make no sense at all. What we can do is come through all these. I want to exclude everything pre-1776 because there's no United States that exists before 1776. So I'm going to select all those, go to rows, hide and exclude. I don't want to see those because those are nonsensical data. If we go back to distribution and then plot year again, those data will be excluded, and now we get years that vary from 1780 to whatever the more recent data is, and I think they're all listed in order. They are up to year 2020. So now we can, that's a nice way, again, of using row states, the rows hide and exclude, to hide and exclude things that we're not really interested in. By the way, this distribution panel is very helpful. It gives us the maximum and minimum values. It gives us a median. It gives us an average. If we average the dates, not that we really care about the average, the average date is 1909. Plus or minus 64 years. That distribution really doesn't matter so much for the years, but we could look at something else. We could look at the distribution of literacy. What's the average literacy for the United States? We'll add literacy to the Y column and hit OK. And we could see the average literacy over US history is actually pretty high, 93.66%, but it's varied from a low of 80% to a high of 99.4. And the middle value, where half the values are above and half the values below, is 96.8%. It also, below the mean, JMP gives you the standard deviation. So that's the plus or minus. So if you want to know the average value for the literacy of the United States, you would report it as 93.6% plus or minus 6.1%. The standard error is how well do we know that mean. So the mean value is 93. The 1.5 is the error on the mean. It's a little bit different than the standard deviation. The standard deviation tells you about the spread of the data, but if you think the mean value is really important and that's what you want to estimate, how well you know that mean is this value here. And then it gives you an upper 95% and lower 95% confidence interval on the mean. So if you want to be 95% confident that of your statement of what the mean value is, well, you'd give 93.66 as the mean value, but you'd say the mean could be anywhere from 90.2 to 97.06. And then n is the number of observations. There's a lot of rows that are listed, but only 15 of them have both literacy. Well, here we just care about the literacy. Just 15 of them give a literacy value. And then of those 15, that's the average. All right, in another video, we'll come back and make some plots. We'll take a look at this plot, not that one, but our XY plot, and look at how to do some regressions and fits through the data. But that'll be our next video.